What's up YouTube, it's your boy Nash here. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another episode of WWE's Biggest Issue. This week's episode is going to be a very intriguing episode because with Crown Jewel now behind us, we now move forward to our next event, which will be Survivor Series in Brooklyn, which buys into the question, will there be an NXT TAKEOVER? That is going to be today's episode. Is the question of whether or not we're going to have any more takeovers moving forward since the reboot just a little over a month ago. Well, it's hard to say because when you think about NXT TakeOver, you think of the superstar, you think of the NXT talent who had been in multiple takeovers throughout their entire careers. You think of Johnny Gargano, who's been in more takeovers than almost anybody in NXT history. Excuse me. You think of Finn Balor, Samoa Joe. You think of Sami Zayn. You think of Kevin Owens. You think of Sasha Banks, Bayley, Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, just to name a few, Samoa Joe. You think of them. They were the ones that made NXT TakeOver as much of a success as they became. Well, we know that Survivor Series will take place on November 21st, which apparently will be the last pay-per-view of 2021. So this is kind of interesting because normally we would have TLC, but because that WWE Day 1 will take place on January 1st of next year, that will technically become the December pay-per-view, so to speak. As of now, there's been reports saying that there are nothing. Actually, truth be told, PW Insider, big shout out to them. No copyrights here. Y'all know how this works. Y'all know how this works with the algorithm. I gotta give a shout out. Big shout out to PW Insider, but they reported that there was currently no listings for NXT TakeOver for November, for next month or in December. And it's been speculated as to whether or not there will be any more takeovers moving forward. But the last takeover we had, it was actually hang on. Gotta get my book out. The last takeover we had was actually TakeOver 36 just a couple months ago, just a few months ago, where we had honestly it was quite the stacked card. We had Walter versus Ilya Dragunov for the NXT UK title. We had Karrion Kross versus Samoa Joe for the NXT title. Raquel Gonzalez versus Dakota Kai for the NXT Women's title. We had LA Knight versus Cameron Grimes for the $1 Million Championship, which was once again retired, which was, it is what it is. And then we had Adam Cole versus Kyle O'Reilly, the final chapter in the undisputed, or actually, as they called it, the undisputed finale, if you will, in a 2 out of 3 falls match where Kyle O'Reilly would pick the first fall, Adam Cole would pick the second fall, Regal would pick the third fall. Kyle O'Reilly chose a straight up one-on-one match. Straight up pin or submission, plain simple. Adam Cole chose a street fight. Regal chose a steel cage, and then on the pre-show, it was Ridge Holland versus Trey Baxter, which was a pretty stacked card. We have, what, 1, 2, 3 new champions. Raquel Gonzalez retaining her title. Kyle O'Reilly ending the Undisputed finale. And Ridge Holland just dominating against Trey Baxter, which was hella crazy. So, again, the question remains, will there be a takeover? It's hard to say because there's been speculation that one of two things can happen. Either A, we'll be seeing it less than we did in 2020 and also in 2021, or it'll become a special for NXT when it airs on the USA Network, which could be possible. But going into Survivor Series weekend, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. So I know that I did say, talk about the future of NXT takeovers, but this will be the pros and cons of Survivor Series weekend, which obviously will include, takeover. So obviously the biggest con of this year's Survivor Series weekend, no takeover. That's like the only thing, because when it comes to WWE, especially the big 4 pay-per-views, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, there's always going to be a takeover the night prior. And this year, there will not. In fact, I think since 2020, let me take a look. Let's see. Alright, so since 2020, since the beginning of 2020, we've had 1, 2, 3. That was supposed to have been 4. Unfortunately. 5. Let's see. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. 12. We've had a dozen. We've had a dozen takeovers since 2020. We had NXT UK TakeOver Blackpool 2, which the main event featured Walter versus Joe Coffey for the NXT UK title. We had Worlds Collide. We had Worlds Collide, which technically was kind of like a takeover in my opinion. Quite the card, actually. It was NXT versus NXT UK, where it featured the Undisputed Era versus Imperium, DIY versus Mustache Mountain, Kaylee Ray versus Mia Yim, Finn Balor versus Ilya Dragunov, and then of course the Fatal 4-Way for the Cruiserweight title was pretty stacked in my honest opinion. And then of course TakeOver Portland. Quite the card, actually. Adam Cole versus Tommaso Ciampa for the NXT title. Tegan Nox versus Dakota Kai in a street fight. And then originally we were supposed to have had NXT TakeOver Tampa, but because of the pandemic, it did not come to pass. So the card is just like this. Basically, it's this. I know that my lighting doesn't do it justice, but yeah, the card was all over the place, so I just left it alone, honestly. But yeah, it is what it is. TakeOver in Your House, the first one, last year in 2020. TakeOver 30, which was arguably one of the biggest takeovers in history, with the fact that we had Damian Priest becoming North American champion, Finn Balor defeating Timothy Thatcher, Adam Cole going up against SmackDown commentator Pat McAfee. It was pretty pretty insane. It was insane. And then TakeOver 31 was quite the unique card, I will say. It was quite the unique card. Originally, we were supposed to have had a match involving Breezango defending their NXT Tag Team titles, but unfortunately, I believe nothing came up. Nothing really came up for them, so unfortunately that did not come to pass. But War Games last year was nuts because we had Team Blackheart, which had Shotzi Blackheart, Ember Moon, Rhea Ripley, and the NXT Women's Champion Io Shirai against Team LeRae, which had Candice LeRae, Dakota Kai, Raquel Gonzalez, and Toni Storm. That was a incredible matchup. As was Team McAfee versus the Undisputed Era. That was a pretty interesting, pretty interesting match inside of War Games. We had Dexter Lumis versus Cameron Grimes, Tommaso Ciampa against Timothy Thatcher. That match was just based on respect. So that's all. That's pretty much all it was. And then of course, to our first takeover of 2021 was TakeOver Vengeance Day, which was kind of interesting, to say the very least. It was not too shabby. We did have the men's and women's Dusty Cup finals, which were pretty awesome. Both MSK and Gonzalez and Kai ended up winning their matches, which was awesome. But if you want to talk about stacked TakeOver cards, this one right here, 100% stacked. Stand and Deliver. That was the most stacked card I had ever seen. 2 nights. I think Tuesday and Wednesday were the nights that featured TakeOver Stand and Deliver, which was absolutely nuts. I mean, think of the card. You have Finn Balor versus Karrion Kross for the NXT title. Santos Escobar and Jordan Devlin in a ladder match to crown the undisputed cruiserweight champion. Io Shirai versus Raquel Gonzalez. MSK versus the Grizzly Young Veterans and Legado del Fantasma for the tag titles. Johnny Gargano versus Bronson Reed for the North American title. Walter versus Tommaso Ciampa for the NXT UK title. Adam Cole versus Kyle O'Reilly in an unsanctioned match. Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart against The Ways, Indy Hartwell, and Candice LeRae. We even had that battle, had that gauntlet match where the winner would face Gargano for the North American title the next night. Kushida versus Pete Dunne, Zoe Stark against Toni Storm, and Breezango against Drake Maverick and Killian Dane. Stacked card. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. It was just insane. It was just insane. And of course, TakeOver in your house too. There were so many takeovers we had. It was just absolutely insane. But again, what are the pros and cons of Survivor Series weekend? Obviously, the biggest con is having no takeover, because as I said before, when it comes to the big 4 pay-per-views, there's always going to be a takeover with a 5th takeover in the middle of the year, like right around like the summer, like right around right around mid-June, right around mid-June, kind of like what they did with I believe. If I remember correctly, I think it was 2018. Yeah, I believe it was 2018, if my memory serves right. What they did with Takeover 25, which was an insane card, absolutely insane. But the biggest pro, I think, of this whole thing is Survivor Series. Is this year's Survivor Series potentially outshining NXT 2.0's TakeOver If it comes around around I'd say mid-December perhaps. But as the report said, it could be that we may not be able to get a takeover as often as we did within the last year, but it could also be that it might be like a special episode, kind of like what they're doing with tomorrow's Halloween Havoc, where it'll feature Tommaso Ciampa defending his NXT title against Braun Breaker, that's gonna be intriguing. That's a match that I got my eyes on. So there are so many things that can go wrong with Survivor Series, but when it comes to a big money main event or a big money match for Survivor Series, I think the biggest match that I would be looking forward to would be, I would say, Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch, winner take all. Kind of like what they did in Jersey a couple years ago. The only thing is that there isn't a third X Factor in that match. So again, I don't know. This is kind of a weird one, because when it comes, as I said before, when it comes to the Big Four, there's always going to be a takeover the night prior, but in this case, there hasn't been anything said. So my assumption, we could very may well see these NXT takeovers as a special that airs on USA, which I wouldn't mind at all. I wouldn't mind it at all, but at the same time, it's like, what's the point? What's the point of airing it on? What's the point of airing it on TV when we know that it's better? And this is my opinion. It's better to watch it on Peacock rather than on USA Network. Why? It's simple. It's simple. If it were to be aired on the USA Network, the matches would be 10 times more predictable than they are on Peacock. No, again, shout outs to both parties. No copyrights here. You guys know how this works, but again, that's one of the biggest cons of this year's Survivor Series weekend. It's just gonna be that. But I will be surprised if we do get a takeover in Brooklyn, because Survivor Series this year will be taking place in Brooklyn, New York, which Barclays Center, woohoo, that's gonna be interesting. So my top 3 matches that I would love to see, which would be the biggest pro for Survivor Series, Big E versus Roman Reigns. That is one that I would love to see. I would love to see that. Charlotte Flair versus Becky Lynch. RK Bro versus The New Day. Don't get me wrong. Usos as tag team champions, incredible. They've been dominant since joining up with their cousin Roman Reigns in the Bloodline as SmackDown tag team champions. But with Xavier Woods now as King of the Ring, that's going to take him far. That will take the New Day far than anything. In WWE. And if they were to become 12-time tag team champions, they can go up against RK Bro, the Raw tag team champions at Survivor Series. That would make for an incredible match. So those are the top 3 matches that I want to see. But that brings me to the question of the day. What match do you guys want to see at Survivor Series? Let me know in the comments below. And that's going to do it for this episode of WWE's Biggest Issue. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure you guys smash that thumbs up button. If you guys are new to the channel, you guys want more episodes of WWE's Biggest Issue, which gets posted every Monday. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you guys do not miss out on any new content that comes your way. And be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. All the links will be out in the description below. And if you guys have any fan mail that you want to send me and want me to open up on the channel, my address will also be in the description as well. And on that, This is your boy Nash, signing out.